Next.
What am I working on next? Well, I'm working on something right now that hasn't been announced yet, but it's fun. I just signed the contract, so I think I can probably tell you. My first book is going to be finally coming out in the UK, and it's for younger readers, but also, the writing style is the same as all my books. It's just the themes are more suitable for younger readers as well, and it's called Blackbringer. The title will change. I don't know what it'll be, but it's about
Dream Dark.
Yeah, so Dream Dark. So I've been revising it because I thought it was an opportunity to write something new, to go back to my first book and make it better. And I knew that the beginning just takes a little bit longer to really get going, to really hook you than I wanted. So I started rewriting it, and I'm really loving it. But then it's hard to know when to stop rewriting. So I'm still working on that, and it's really fun to be back there. It's this. I wrote 2 books. There was supposed to be 5, but then the publisher quit, and the new publisher canceled everything and fired everybody. And and I've always sort of compared it to when the alpha baboon dies and the new alpha kills all the babies and starts over. It's kind of what it was like. So maybe I'll get to finish the Dream Dark series at some point. But right now I'm just revising the first one, and then I have a new book that I'm due to be starting for next year, and that's not announced yet. I can't talk about it, but it is adult fantasy. So my books here are published adult, but in the States they're YA. So it'll feel very much the same writing-wise. It might be a little sexier. I don't know. See, woo! But I'm really looking forward to that, and hopefully be able to announce what that is soon.
So your Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy has a lot of very interesting ideas, and where did you come up with some of these?
Where did I come up with them? So Daughter of Smoke and Bone started on a day. It's sort of a mythic day in my mind because, I talked a little bit about my writing issues, and so after I did Lips Touch, there was this book I had been really excited to start working on, and I now sort of jokingly call it my Ballerinas in Space book. It was sci-fi, and when I started writing it, and I really could not get interested in it once I started, and it was really not fun in any way, and I was just spent months though working on it because I've learned that I have to keep at it and not quit and finish things, and but it was really, I got to a very point of low morale because I couldn't get the characters to come to life, and it was really flat. So one day, out of sort of desperation, because I started really hating writing and I did not want to sit down to write, I thought I'm going to just do something else. I'm going to write something else today just for fun. And in my memory, in one sense, I have this sort of narrative version of that day where I had no idea what I was going to write about, and I sat down and I just started writing, and this blue-haired teenage girl appeared, and she was arguing with her father, who wasn't human, and he was dealing teeth out of a basement shop, and he had a wishbone around his neck that she wasn't allowed to touch, and I wrote all day. I wrote thousands of words, and it was fun, and it just appeared from nowhere, and these characters were alive immediately, and it was a sort of mystical experience because it's usually not like that for me. And when other writers would say the characters just appeared or the muse was working through me or something like that, I was always bitter because I thought they were lying, because that just to make us feel bad or whatever. And so on the one hand, that's how I remember it, but also I was blogging at the time, so if I look back, I can kind of see that even though it seems really clear in my memory that that's what happened, it was not exactly true, because I had been doing all this prompt writing at the time, and I'd been doing a lot of writing practice, the stories that became Lips Touch. And so when I look back at my blog, I can see that I actually had been writing all these small pieces that really laid the groundwork for what became Daughter of Smoke and Bone, so that when I sat down that day, it felt like those ideas came from nowhere, but they really came from writing exercises and from practice and from just writing random stuff every day. And so I had written, one of the prompts had been wishes, and I wrote 3 little vignettes, and one, there was this guy who was human in that story who lived under, in a shop under a bridge and dealt teeth for wishes, and there was a lot of stuff that was like that sort of that day sort of became Daughter of Smoke and Bone. So it didn't really come from nowhere. So I really think that value of writing exercises and having a notebook where you write in just for fun, and it stirs up your imagination in just unexpected ways. And so I really saw that happen, and I'm sort of sad that on a daily basis I can't keep doing that. The writing exercise, maybe I could, but I don't, or I feel like I would want to finish all those things or do something with them. Maybe I should do more writing exercises, because clearly it was really fruitful. But so that's where that came from. And I had a notebook that I kept just for those of you who are writers. There's a few fun exercises. One of them was I had this notebook that was just lists of things that fascinated me or things that lit my mind on fire. And I would start, kind of with the idea of if you were in a bookstore and you were shopping for a book and you're reading the backs of books or the flaps of books, and you know that feeling when you see one, you're like, oh my God, this book is for me, and you can't wait to read it. What would those things be? What are the things that would give you that reaction? So I started listing them, and it's kind of like the other exercise of writing the 20 things that might happen next. You write the obvious ones, the things you know that you're interested in, but you can't stop. You have to write 100 things in this one sitting or whatever. And you start just forcing yourself to come up with other things. And pretty soon I would be writing paragraphs that turn into little plot ideas, and it's just great to just push your imagination farther. So there's a lot of exercises like that. And I did one a long time ago. I did it a few times where I would have a notebook and I would have to write 5 pages in it a day or something, but I wasn't allowed to read them. So I would just do free writing about anything, and I wasn't allowed to read them until a couple of months after the notebook was full. And then it was I called it the attic notebook or something, because it would feel like it was a notebook that you found in the attic that was written by somebody else, because I wouldn't remember anything that was in it, but I actually had written it. And that was really fun. So I'd have a lot of ideas, and it was actually, they were mine, but I didn't remember writing them. So that's kind of cool. If any of you feel like doing that. Thank you for carrying the microphone around. Oh.
Yeah, hi. I really love your world building, so my question basically is, how do you come up with those worlds, and how do you develop them, especially since they're fantastical?
Yeah, so the just general world building question, how do I...
Kind of, especially well, the fantastical worlds, basically, because you have to find, all the races, the rules, the cities and all that, and I don't know, how do you come up with these, and kind of do you develop them early in the beginning? Do they kind of come up during writing?
When I was a younger writer, more middle school age, teen and preteen, what I called writing was all world building. I would just come up with just dream up these worlds, and I never did any storytelling. I never set any stories in them, or did it. It was just the world building, because I always loved that. And so now I do it really differently. I just need to know enough. I try to know enough to make it feel real to me, and then figure out what I need as I go through it. And I think that a little world building goes a long way. And the thing that I've been thinking lately, and that I hope is true, and I'm curious actually, one of these days soon, I'd like to go through Strange the Dreamer and highlight passages that are actual world building or world description passages, because I think that there's a lot less than it seems like there is, because what I try to do is I try to give you just enough that your mind then recreates the rest, in a way that's compelling or unique to you. And so I try to give cues, early on we find out that in this world people have two hearts, so we know that we're in a different world. Or early on we find out that there's this kind of lighting in the library that's luminous stones, and we know we're in another world. Just little hints like that, and things that aren't really explained, or hints of other animal species, or just common nouns that are dropped in that are imaginary, so we feel like we're somewhere exotic, even if we don't see where, we don't know what they are, just to create a sense of a bigger world out there. And I really try to minimize the actual description. There are places where I do give description, but I think, and I could be wrong, find out, that if you were to actually underline those passages, it would be less than it feels like, because I'm trying to just give you enough that your mind is doing the rest of the work, because I know that we really end up skimming a lot of description. I do. Even though I love writing it, I'm really afraid of readers, giving you a big paragraph to skim. So I try to keep it really, really short, and just using carefully chosen words that create an atmosphere that does a lot of the work, and so that you feel like there's more than I've actually given you, I think. But I do love the world building, and so, but I like to come to a place where I need to know more about, I didn't think of what weep is like until I get to weep, or, because Because I think if you make a lot of the decisions up front, then you end up writing yourself into a corner, or I think, you know, the story develops and then you know what you need when you get there. And if you've made decisions arbitrarily early on, you can sort of hem yourself in. So yeah, but I love doing the world building, but I do try to not get hung up on it because it's really a different thing than the actual writing. Yeah.
Just wondering, what's your overall favorite part of writing, like the editing or the
I can't quite hear you.
Your favorite part of writing?
What's my favorite part of writing?
Including like the editing or the first draft?
I think my favorite part of writing is the being finished with writing part. I mean, it sounds terrible to say that I often don't enjoy writing while I'm doing it, or I don't love it, but then I'm always trying to get to the places where I do. And one of the things about perfectionism is that you know, I think that the most fun parts of writing are like that day when I started Daughter of Smoke and Bone. It's when you can get into a flow state where you just sort of fall into the creative process. And one of the things about perfectionism is that it prevents you from doing that. It kind of keeps you at the surface of your mind, being worried about like the housekeeping, and it prevents you from sinking into a flow state. So I'm always trying to like trick myself into getting into the flow and getting in those moments where you actually love writing, where it doesn't even feel like you're doing it. It feels like there's almost something that's coming through you. That is a real feeling, and I actually believe that's where the mythology of the muse comes from, because when you do get into flow, it does feel like something's happening that's not entirely you. And you know it is. Again, it's that the brain is amazing, and it's these capacities we don't understand. But it is your brain, but it doesn't feel like it is, and it's so great. And I love those moments. Those are the best. But for me, unfortunately, they're kind of rare. So I have to love the moments, love what I can. I love brainstorming new ideas and making notes and all of that, and it sort of feels like this preparatory work, and there's this big fear, anxiety piece to actually starting the writing. Even if it's just a new scene, there's this just like, all the perfectionism is like this crazy fear that, you know, I'm gonna somehow mess this up. Like, who's gonna know? It's absolutely ridiculous, but it doesn't ever get any easier. But I just have to know that once I start the actual writing and using all the strategies I've come up with, it will get better, and I will get words on the page. And I have to let myself play with the language and love it as I'm doing it. You know, love the sentences that I'm writing, because my brain does need that. I do need to love the sentences. I know a lot of writers who say they write for the story first, and then they sort of apply the language later, like it's a separate pass for the language. But for me, that doesn't work. I have to. The language is integral to it from the beginning. So I have to love the language as I'm writing it. So I mean, there are a lot of parts of the process that I sometimes love. And afterwards, I think really writing the end is like the most satisfying feeling, and it makes everything worth it. And I do love editing. So first drafts are really hard for me. And then when it's done and I get to make it better, that's when having a perfectionist brain actually is helpful. So editing and revising is less painful. That's where my natural tendencies come in handy instead of being like a handicap. So, how about you? What's your favorite part?
Probably the first draft, because it's something new, and it's when you get to first almost introduce yourself to the characters that you've come up with.
Yeah.
So I like that.
Yeah, I understand that, and I think there's a lot of writers who love doing the drafting part, and then get hung up with editing and don't love that part. And I think then there's people who legit love both parts, and we don't have to like those people. It's like, but I think generally it's one or the other. So you just have to get through it. Yeah, because it is really important, editing. All right. Thank you so much, you guys, for coming in, for asking questions, and for rolling with the format change. And I'm going to head over and sign now, so maybe I'll see you over there. And I'll also be signing later, too.